your history, sing of your future, educate the young ones, rejuvenate the old ones. I am the song of unity.
I've been very occupied for 2 years in the peace movement. You and I don't have to talk about nuclear weapons. This is agreed. Yes. But could we perhaps talk a bit about the Cold War behind the weapons? What I consider now is that 35 years of rigid Cold War structures in Europe, maybe outside of Europe, are now under challenge. And there is a new expression of autonomous people's movements, if you like, a people's détente underneath the states, which is taking place. Solidarity in the East, the movement for peace in the West, the movement in Greece, and so on. And that this is beginning to make the entire political situation more fluid.
In 1948, I wrote my book on dialectic,
Yes.
in which I said these political parties, Social Democratic, Communist Party, and these are done. That the days are coming now when we shall have parties of 8 or 10 million people. Those are the parties of the future. I'm finished with these little parties. That is what is taking place today.
Yes.
Because the people have realized at last that they cannot trust those above, not only the executives, but the people who are supposed to represent them to become the executive or to be against the executive. And there is right through the world today a feeling that there is nothing to be done unless we do it ourselves. And if after Poland, which has been tremendously received in the United States, the labor movement in the United States was notable that it went its own way. But with the Polish development, there took place a tremendous meeting in Washington. You heard of that?
Yes, yes.
300,000 people, 1/3 of whom were blacks, demonstrating against the government. And they called themselves Solidarity, which would not, people wouldn't lose sight of the fact that they were associating with the Poles. And not only they called themselves Solidarity, but they said that they would not have the president come to lecture them anymore.
Well, here in Western Europe, it seems to me the form of the crisis in labor and social democratic movements is a crisis of Atlanticism under criticism. That for 30 years, social democracy in general in Western Europe has settled for an Atlanticist bargain in which it has placed itself under the military, diplomatic, and in some cases like the IMF, economic, political hegemony of the most powerful capitalist nation in the world, the United States. And then within that, if there's been a growth economy, there have been some welfare, educational, trade union rights, some bargains to be made.
Didn't France get out of it?
Yes.
Britain
Yes.
is supposed to have got out of it, but in reality, the British independence is totally subordinate to the American, isn't that so?
That's true, yes. So now we are having, in the last 2 years, and the peace movement is part of this, a cracking apart of the old Atlanticist structures. And inside all the major social democratic parties, in Britain the Labour Party, in the German Social Democratic Party, the old Atlanticist ideological and bureaucratic controls are under challenge.
In Holland in particular.
Yes, in Holland too. And some socialist parties in Scandinavia, and now in Greece with PASOK, have moved right out of the Atlanticist game. And the other thing is that 30 years of Cold War created a double bind. You couldn't be for peace and freedom. If you were for peace in the West, you were supposed to be pro-Soviet. If you were for freedom in the East, you were supposed to be an agent of the West. Now we have movements which are for peace and freedom, in which the movement for peace in the West is recognizing solidarity, is recognizing the movement for trade union and civil rights in the East. And that's a force that could be immensely strong.
My ideas in these matters, looking at it from a distance,
Yes.
was that some years ago, calling upon Gateskill to say that he would fight and fight and fight, which the Social Democratic Party had never done before. He was fighting and fighting and fighting against the unilateral attitude of the British people. In reality, they are against nuclear war. They are against the nuclear weapons. That means destruction. But at the same time, this is the most convenient and comprehensive way of saying we are against the whole thing that you all have been carrying on.
Yes, and I think this is strongest among young people.
But at the same time, I believe that they have been so excluded from any serious intervention in the political world. These parties have got things so tight, and the political organizations have also got them so tight, that here is an example for them to break away from all that, and that this is not only people who are disturbed about the war, as they undoubtedly are, but it's an opportunity to make a political demonstration and take political activity against all that they are doing.
I agree with that. The weapons are under challenge. I mean, they are immensely dangerous. They could be used. The pessimistic picture in which the military structures on both sides, perhaps without planning it, get involved in a nuclear war is quite possible. I mean, I thought until the peace movement developed, it was probable. This is partly because these huge military organizations, which are systems which go into security, policing, research, into politics, they are states within states, are self-reproducing. They've developed a mass of weaponry now, enough to destroy the world several times, to destroy Europe here, packed here 30 times, which is now more and more refined. Instead of talking about deterrence of mutual assured destruction, a few delivery systems, they have multitudes of artillery, landmines, depth charges, the neutron bomb is coming, everything. And they are actually more accurate. They're talking about war fighting. They're talking about winning a nuclear war. And in one way or another, starting in a conflict in the Middle East around an attempt to hold the oil for the United States and the West, this could spread. What would this mean? We know from two experiences in Europe this century and many experiences across the world. World War I, World War II were not planned. These came, and they were worse than anyone's expectations. So it could easily happen.
The First World War, the First World War was the first time the First World fought itself. When they couldn't decide how to divide all the wealth, they stole and they plundered, swindled and squandered, over and over and over and over and over 400 years from the Third World. Second World War, Second World War, Second World War was the second time the First World fought itself. This time they were joined by the Second World to help itself. They fought among themselves again. Stop one of them from snatching again. All of the cake they were still stealing from the Third World.
would happen. Now, there are two things, I think, that could happen. One, in Europe, no strategists, Lord Mountbatten himself, Lord Zuckerman, do not believe that a limited nuclear war would be possible. If the United States thought it could have one and be saved, this would not be the case. These systems would almost automatically blast off against each other. Once any small nuclear war started in Europe, there would be tendency to send off the intercontinental ballistic missiles and to draw the whole northern western hemisphere into that. And now, would this destroy everything? Well, it wouldn't kill everyone. You have different estimates of how many would be killed. But it would destroy the infrastructure of civilization. It would destroy the hospitals, the factories, the roads, the communications. And people in these societies are not able to suddenly reinvent a new subsistence economy. Those who survived would have a burden of genetic damage going on through the generations, so that you would have a sudden reduction to a panic-struck, sick, pre-civilization without an infrastructure. And then we can all imagine whatever would happen then. People would flee to the mountains to try and dig potatoes and survive, and their children would be deformed. That's the result. It would mean that civilization would have to come back from the southern hemisphere. But the other scenario where a limited war could happen might perhaps be in the Middle East, or in Africa, or in Latin America, South America, or in parts of Asia, where Israel maybe tried to do a preemptive strike against an Arab state. The Arab state struck back, and the superpowers withdrew and said, let them do it. This would destroy those nations, but might be sealed off. But what's terrible here is that although this would not destroy civilization, it is an instrument of racist genocide, which in the hands, let us say, of South Africa, could be employed with the sense that millions of black Africans are less than human beings. We use this weapon. And that's why, you know, a limited nuclear war may sound nicer than a real nuclear war, but in some senses it is even more genocidal and racist in character. And therefore this has to be a total confrontation of civilization against it.
People are not calculating the damage that is being done to human nature today.
Yes.
Not only in the case of war, that we do not know, but simply we know that this monstrous thing is taking place, not only genetically, but we are human beings who live by the mind and ideas. And those are the ideas that are filling our minds. And we cannot calculate the mischief that is coming from those.
And so the mood is certainly against the weapons to clear them out of, all of them out of Europe first, and then out of the world second. This is where we think we start. Okay. But young people, and not only young people, are also pissed off with the Cold War, if you don't mind my saying so. It's something they've inherited. There are elements in the ruling groups who need the Cold War. That is, it's a roadshow that was put on the road in 1947. The hawks on one side feed the hawks on the other. And they use Cold War ideology, not just against the other one, but as a means of internal regulation and discipline inside their own states.
That's Mr. Reagan's policy.
That's right.
I'm going to keep you all down. We can't spend, but nevertheless we have to spend all the money that we seem to need on the weapons.
So anti-communism in the United States is necessary, even if the Soviet Union didn't exist, as a means of controlling the American labor movement, American radical and dissident groups, they can be said to be alien as pro-communist. You know, if you can denounce all the authentic movements for change of the American people as pro-commie,
they are not being as successful as they were. There is growing in the United States labor movement a feeling of resistance and taking steps against the executive, which is very rare. They feel at this time that they have to do that, and they are helped by the fact that the Europeans are doing it too. So these two movements are taking place. They have been there a long time. I can't help thinking that in 1968 there was an embryonic solidarity in France.
Yes.
And at the same time, in Czechoslovakia, the armies had to move. So that what we are seeing is nothing surprising, strange, and new. The elements of it have been there coming a long while, but it has burst out in this concrete step, and that is what has to be used.
Well, C.L.R., you and I both think solidarity in Poland is of historic importance.
Absolutely.
Yes. You're not concerned about its nationalistic or its Catholic forms?
Not at all, not bothered. That they say they are for the Warsaw Pact, I don't believe they are. They say that the church is playing a role. I believe that in their situation, I would do the same. The church would be very useful to prevent people jumping on me. But I noticed that they said that they called upon the working class people in the other parts of Eastern Europe to join them in what they were doing. And that was a demonstration that put in its place Warsaw Pact and church and everything else. They've realized the need and were able to say, we want solidarity in the whole of Eastern Europe.
Yes. So we now have a movement in Poland which is working class, which is
historical,
anti-statist, or it is a critique of the state in the interest of the autonomy of peoples. It's not a total critique. I think you'd agree it's a little bit male chauvinist. I mean, there's not enough presence of women in this.
I know, but a woman has said that she has told them so, and they talked about it and agreed.
Yes. But it's obviously also very Polish. Do you expect it to extend? Do you think it will spread into the Soviet Union itself or take new forms there?
I don't like the word spread. I believe that what created it in Poland fundamentally exists in the other states.
That's right.
I came here and said to The Guardian, June 1980, before the trouble at Gdansk, the real place to look is in Eastern Europe.
Yes.
Because there that kind of thing cannot go on. I want to go to South Africa. There is a man there called Mandela, you know him.
Yes.
And some 20 or 30 years ago, Mandela told the South African government, I am against you. You can put me in prison. When you put me out, I shall continue to be against you because what you are doing is wrong.
Yes.
He removed it from the economic,
Yes.
the political, the racial, and put it on the plane of morals.
Yes.
I think that was magnificent, and that people we must not forget that apart from the political issue, they feel that this thing is wrong.
Yes.
Something is going on that shouldn't go on, with a dangerous ultimatum in front of us, and that's why we want to put an end to it.
I sing of your suffering, I sing of your pain, I sing of your misery, and I call out your name. I am the song of unity, I am the song of love, I am the song of liberty, I am the freedom song, I am the song, I am the song, you are forbidden to sing. I am the song, I am the song, Azania's song, Azania's song.
My view is that it's the duty of the democratic and peace movement in the West to bring back the pressure, to bring back the military pressure upon the Soviet bloc, because that will give space for movement and autonomous developments in their own way, in their own forms, across on that side.
What do you mean by bring back the military pressure?
I mean, we have to sweep weapons out of Europe. We have to move forward to nuclear-free zones. We have to move forward to conventional disarmament on both sides. As in the old Rapatsky plan, we've got to get a zone in Central Europe. East and West Germany have got to be progressively demilitarized. And as we do that, it will make it easier for people in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, in their own ways, not intervening from here, in their own ways, to find their own modes of transforming their societies. But as that happens, so we're going to discover in the West that we also have got a new space for movement. The kind of space you see in Greece, and we're going to see soon, I think, in Spain and Portugal, maybe in Britain and Holland too.
And Italy?
Yes?
I think that we can say definitively that Europe is on the way now to break itself away from the domination, militarily so to speak, but in economic and political situation from the United States. And that the United States, after that, is beginning to see that the amount of energy and money and time that they spend on the safeguarding of Europe is not necessary anymore, because Europe is breaking away from it.
Now the question then is, which direction does Europe take? And I want to ask you this, that you yourself are an internationalist. You are a European, you are a Caribbean, you are an African. You belong everywhere. But don't people in the rest of the world get fed up with Europe's self-concentration? How about the anti-imperialist struggle? How does it relate to this? Is breaking the Cold War in Europe going to be of real assistance to anti-imperialist, democratic and socialist movements in the rest of the world?
Third World War, Algeria. Third World War, Argentina. Third World War, Bangladesh. Third World War has been raging ever since the Second One. When the blood was decided that the Third World should fight and die for them. Ideologized from brothers, Congo, militarized from others, Egypt, partition the religion, so the Third World War would go on forever. Ghana. If you're living in the Third World, Haiti, living in
there is in existence in all the, what you might call the third world underdeveloped countries, masses of population who are being exploited by a small circle of intellectuals and policemen and others who succeeded to the British and European domination. The British very cleverly said, you take it, and we send you a prince and princess to tell you that it is yours. But once they sit in those chairs and have the British or the European statistics to deal with, quite often not their native language, but have to use the European language.
We are a nation born with a mission.
They are more and more, not from personal corruption, but the circumstances in which they are, draw them in completely towards the American and towards the European domination. But below them, there is, I know this in the Caribbean, I have seen it in Africa, below them is a massive number of people who don't like it at all, but don't know what to do. And if at any time the European peoples were to take some steps along the lines of Poland, there will be a tremendous burst of feeling among the mass of the underdeveloped peoples against those governments whose only hope for their future is to get what they can from the existing regimes in the United States and Europe. The most notable example is the Portuguese in Africa. The Portuguese were there, and Kissinger had a committee appointed to say what will happen. Then the committee told him, as they have been telling them for 300 years, the Africans are bound to lose. And Kissinger said, if that is so, I will continue to give the Portuguese support from Mobutu and from South Africa. When he was one morning surprised by learning that the Portuguese said they are going. The moment the power of these is in any way shaken by any serious movement of the mass of the population in the advanced countries, there will be a tremendous response among all elements of the colonial peoples.
Now, here in Britain, we've had a quiet kind of history because we've always exported violence.
Margaret, the old witch with the hatchet, wanted to send me away to clean up her ship. Somewhere out there in South Atlantic, she said, all you have to do is run that cat and bang a few. I did. Well, I told her once, I told her twice, I told her once, I told her twice, I told her 20,000 times. I don't wanna go, no, I don't wanna go, no, I don't wanna go to fight the war, no, I don't wanna go, no, I don't wanna go, no, I don't wanna go to fight the war, no.
At the moment when we're talking now, the Soviet Union is still in Afghanistan. The United States is threatening military intervention against Cuba and against Nicaragua. Could I suggest that this whole Cold War period, which has often been a hot war for the underdeveloped world, it's been a violent war, has been one in which there have been immense distorting influences exerted from the superpowers, from the Cold War itself. The most obvious is the export of arms and infrastructures by both sides. All the grand talk about aid. What is the real aid being given? The real aid is the export not only of foul machines of war, but also of military aerodromes, military infrastructure. But could I suggest that also, in a curious way, on the left, Marxism has been militarized by this experience because it has been an experience of armed resistance, and because the influence of post-Stalinist Soviet Marxism, or pseudo-Marxism, has emphasized always its bureaucratic military forms, there has been a loss of the democratic, anti-statist, and autonomous people's content of another
exposure of
yes.
the people.
Yes.
Lenin said that the problem is not only the decline of capitalism, but rising from the decline. The conflict is going to be between a declining capitalism and the socialism that is coming. And I see Iran and Poland and the others in that way.
Yes.
Now, Iran is the country that we have to look at. We can compare Iran to the revolutions in Europe. The French Revolution began with liberty, equality, fraternity. In 3 years' time, with great liberty and great equality, but no fraternity, they cut off the head of king, queen, and a whole lot of them. The same thing happened in Britain. They began with no taxation, without representation, and in the end, without taxation or representation, they cut off the head of the king. And Cromwell finished with monarchy. I believe we're not paying sufficient attention to Iran. I have been informed that there is a mass of working class organizations, peasant organizations, in addition to the workers in the oil companies. I am told further that those Arab chiefs who are spending all this money from the oil and Egypt are all very much concerned that what took place in Iran is an indication of what could take place there. There is no problem of where they are going to go. And then there is the last one, which I would like to hear you speak about before I say anything about it. To me, one of the great countries in the world today, one of those whose action will be decisive, is India. Yes. I have read what you have said about India, but I would like you to say, as somebody who has been there and knew the people, will you please?
Yes. To talk with you is to talk with a historian. You have this sense of the openness, the unpredicted character of process. You can't impose programs on it.
No.
I'm no authority on India. I have a particular family connection with India, and I've made one visit there. I have many Indian friends. I have this sense of the importance of India. It is an amazing subcontinent. There is no idea in any part of the world, in Russia, China, Washington, the Caribbean, Africa, which is not present in some Indian's head. It's a society of the most extraordinary plural discourse, of great vitality, of a gentle and anti-acquisitive popular tradition. That is, it is possible not to get into the dreadful bureaucratic growth programming which has been afflicting the rest of the world. One of my problems about India is that it seems to me that even Marxism in some Indian minds is imposing upon them a false description of reality, which is taken from the experience of other nations. Some of my Indian Marxist friends are always wanting India to repeat the experience of October 1917.
That is the United States also.
Yes. It seems to me that, in a sense, the Indians are it's a country of promise, but I don't think they even understand their own promise yet. They haven't quite given a name to it.
The entry of India into the modern world as we know it, with solidarity at the back of our minds, will mean a complete change in the Far East and the Middle East, that they are so divided that the only thing that can join them together is that they join together. And the peasants in Poland gave us a fine example. They said, we wish to join the party, but at the same time we wish to have independence as a peasant organization. I am looking forward to India because I believe that if India moves and India can only move in a certain direction. They are too divided to move in scraps. I believe some great mass movement is to take place. It will alter the whole face of China and all Arab states and everything. That is today the decisive country that I'm looking at. My friend Farooq has told me that he would take me to India. If it is at all possible, I will go there to have a look of my own.
You've not been?
I have not been.
Ah, you must go. You must go, and you must go to Calcutta. It's the Paris. It's the Paris of Asia.
Paris,
and
yes.
here you have people in this city of poverty, sitting down at their doorsteps of their great tenements, reading poetry to each other, playing music. It's a creative society, one that you would recognize from the Caribbean.
You know, I have not been able to read about Calcutta. People have been conceived on the pavement, born on the pavement, live on the pavement, and die on the pavement. And I tell you quite frankly, when I come to those pages, I turn them over.
And they make poetry on the pavement
They
too.
make I tell
Yes,
you.
yes, they are indomitable.
Well,
Yes.
But I feel that India has got a tremendous past, that when the British went there, their civilization was perfectly able to stand up against the British and the things that they were doing, despite many backward areas. And that today, India will settle the fate of China. If there is a mass movement in India, the Chinese can no longer keep running to Europe as that short vice president and begging and say, we want you to help us. The next place I want to go, and I'm going to arrange it if at all possible, is India, because I believe that those millions have a lot more in them than Mrs. Gandhi and company. Mrs. Gandhi promised them, then failed. Other people came in, they failed. She has come back. Nobody knows what's happening. And that tremendous uncertainty, in my opinion, leads ultimately to a feeling that we have to get together to do something. That's what I believe. And I believe that India is very important and that we are not doing enough on India and we are not doing enough on the blacks in Brazil. Those are the two places, and those are two gaps. Do you think that in stating that I am overstating or understating the case?
You're an optimist, and it's extraordinary to get your optimistic view of the world. I am midway between being an extreme pessimist and an optimist like you. I mean, I think that the power structures under threats of this kind could blow up, could finish us off, could go down with a nuclear war. But if we can stop that, I tend towards the same optimism that we're going into a whole decade in which the space for movement, of autonomous movements, is opening up across the whole world. And what interests me is that I've always feel you have this historical view of the unpredictability of process. Maybe you are emphasizing the optimistic, the hopeful perspectives over strongly, but unless we can see those perspectives, then we can't work for them.
We began in Africa about 1950-something, George Padmore and the rest of us here, and people laughed at us. They said those West Indians have read a lot of books, but they know nothing. Independence of Africa. 20 years later, from the north, right down to Namibia, Africa is independent. I was in Ghana in 1957 talking to Nkrumah and to Padmore about what had happened. And if anybody had told us that in 10 years' time there would be 40 new African states, and in 25 years' time, apart from South Africa, the whole of Africa would be free, we would have said, that man is an agent provocateur sent by the colonial office in order to disrupt the movement. We didn't think it possible. In Africa you have Zimbabwe with his Marxist-Leninist party. You have Nyerere with the Arusha Declaration, one of the great documents of the day. You have Mozambique and Angola doing their best because they have to depend on the mass of the population. On the other hand, you have Houphouët-Boigny in Ivory Coast, you have Senegal, and you have a lot of French playing about in Central Africa. But there is no doubt whatever that if those who are below these governments get the slightest opportunity, those who are in power will not be able to do anything with them. That was my opinion. That was the opinion of Walter Rodney, who unfortunately died.
Africa, oh Africa, I see. Africa, oh Africa, be free. I listen to Africa, what do I hear? Machine guns, cannons, tanks and jets. I look over Africa, what do I see? Young mothers mourning the loss of their kids. I walk across Africa, what do I find? The millions of bodies the armies left behind. Oh, Africa, oh Africa, I see. Oh, Africa, oh Africa, be free.
History is moving at such a rate that if I'm writing plays which will try to express what is happening for the general public, I have to rewrite them entirely because the history has made what I wrote the first time no longer viable. Now, you write history, what would you be able to do now to the making of the British working class? I noticed the importance of that book was, although you ended about 1832 or thereabouts, it was still absolutely viable in regard to when it appeared. But I think that history now is moving so fast that it has to be journalism. You cannot sum up anything. By the time you have summed it up, it's gone. What do you say about that?
Well, I think they're two different things, and they sometimes can't easily go together. I mean, I think one thing one is doing in history is one is giving back to people the history that historians have confiscated from them. But at the same time, and this is the difficult one, a historian belongs to a discipline, and one must not allow one's history to be propaganda, because that in itself can be to betray, to give false expectations. We've had, only in this century, in the last 100 years, terrible manifestations of popular consciousness, not only Nazism and fascism, but the entire record of complicity with imperialism within Western labor movements and Western social democracy. And therefore, history cannot just be inspirational. One has to be rigorous, objective, and disciplined, and to examine problems and questions which may give offense to populists, may give offense to the left sometimes. One has to say, the pursuit of truth is also our business.
I must say I very much admire what you, Hobsbawm, and one or two others are doing, that you are going back and digging into the history and digging out things that people have forgotten and ignored and suppressed. And that makes us to understand today the greater importance of the people who are ignored. Mr. Scarman writes about the committees and the police and the leaders, and he seems not to know what everybody knows, that those leaders haven't got the confidence at all of the great mass of the black people. And if it had been left to these leaders, those black boys would never have come out. So that there is a dual feature. You are able, by digging deep into past history, I think that's what you are doing, and dealing with some people who have been ignored, you are making real and making it important for historians today to forget what is taking place at the top, to deal with it, but to go down and do what has not been done for the Ladadis and those people. Is that what, are you aware that you are doing that?
Yes, and in the work I was doing in history until the the peace movement took all my time, I was going back, in a sense, to the a moment before the Industrial Revolution, to rediscover the fact that the offense that capitalism did was not only in poverty, oppression, imperialism, it was also in defining human need as economic in a narrow sense. And when one goes back to the 18th century, to people's movements, to the culture of the people in the 18th century, you're going back to a time, and this relates to India in some ways today, in which people have needs which are never to be expressed in simple confrontations over exploitation in a narrow economic sense. And in a sense, I think capitalism imposed a disguise upon human need. It tried to say, no, that's economic. And in some cases, the opposition to it accepted the disguise and says, our demands are wages, wages, wages. But the real demands, and the women's movement is showing this now, and solidarity is showing this now, and the peace movement is showing this now, the real demands of people cannot be expressed in narrow economic terms.
You go down to the mass of the population who do not write books and do not express themselves in speeches, and by bringing what they did and the few things that remain of what they said, you are not only writing that history, but you are telling historians today that's what you have to do. Many people in the Caribbean tell me that the work that I write about the Caribbean is of fundamental importance to them, in that I go beyond wages and the oppression of the imperialists and deal with the social and artistic and historical development of the population. You have to go below, and it is below that you can make your history contemporary, although you are writing about 200 years ago.
Or about Greece, ancient Greece.
About ancient Greece. That's what I believe is the function of the historian, and that's what I'm trying to do.
C.L.R., you are 80. Tom Mann, our great British Labour leader, the leader of the dock strike, when he became 80, he said, I hope to grow more dangerous as I grow older. That is what you are living in your own life. Your ideas are extending more widely. They are more dangerous to state structures. They are more creative. I want to congratulate you on behalf of my own countrymen and thank you for your own contribution to our movements here.
I can only say I thank you, and I would appreciate that coming from nobody else more than from you. Thank you very much.
I am the song of unity. I am the song of love. I am the song of liberty. I am the freedom